President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to host his Angolan counterpart, President JoaoLourenco, on Thursday. Angola is one of the countries that opened its doors to South Africa's freedom fighters during the fight against apartheid. The two leaders will also address the business forum under the theme South Africa and Angola working together to forge a new era of cooperation and partnership to increase mutually beneficial trade and investment. SABC News' Khayelihle Khumalo joins me in studio to unpack this and a number of other issues taking place on the continent. Khayelihle, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with a very big one. The UN Secretary-General's visit to the country tomorrow. Just talk to us about the significance of this visit now, at a time when South Africa has assumed its presidency of the G20.
Well, undoubtedly, Mfundo, obviously the expectations are high with South Africa leading such a very influential global organization. So the presence of the top UN diplomat in South Africa. So it's all about reaffirming South Africa's priorities around global solidarity, but issues around sustainable development, but also climate change. I mean, for example, you go back to the G20 summit when he addressed it in Brazil, where he said the G20 countries must lead. I mean, these are countries with economic clout, but also they must use their diplomatic leverage to bring the change, because the world is desperately looking for the leaders who will be able to lift the world out of all the myriad of challenges that we're facing, from the conflict to the environmental degradation and many other issues as well. So we're expecting Mr. Guterres as well to address the Shepherds meeting, again really emphasizing South Africa's role, that now you're leading G20 and you're in African countries. So the issues of Global South really should take center stage, but also just in terms of the world to understand the gravity when you talk about the reforms of the key institutions, whether you're talking about the financial institutions. And Mr. Guterres has been very vociferous in talking about these issues, saying the current architecture is unfair and very much outdated as well.
But judging by our conversation yesterday, where Ronald Lamola actually addressed the Sherpa's first engagement, it seems as though South Africa is really taking up to this, at least, position of asserting itself, where they now want to discuss the cost of capital. That you've got developed nations that are given loans, but they spend most of their GDP servicing these loans, and then there's very little development on the continent. So most certainly it seems that South Africa is ready for business. But if we have to look at his diary, what exactly is the UN Secretary-General going to be busy with tomorrow?
So what you understand so far is that around midday tomorrow is going to address the Shepherds meeting, where he's really going to talk about a number of issues around the standing when it comes to G20 countries. I mean, obviously there's quite a lot at stake, but for South Africa as well, to be able to ensure that they are able to represent the Global South so well, especially where we've seen from Bali in Indonesia coming to India, New Delhi, and recently in Brazil. So a lot has been happening in terms of the inclusion when it comes to the social issues, but poverty eradication. So we do understand as well, after that he's going to have an opportunity where he's going to pay a courtesy call to South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola at OR Tambo building in Pretoria. Again, really the issues around South Africa's priorities, but also a number of issues globally that are just facing the world as well. But we do understand at some point he will meet with President Cyril Ramaphosa as well.
All right. And then Angola is here. President JoaoLourenco is here on Thursday on a state visit. What are we expecting there?
A very significant state visit, Mfundo. I mean, for example, you go back to 2017 when President JoaoLourenco officially took over. So the very first country that he visited was South Africa, and he made it patently clear that South Africa is very key to Angola for so many aspects. You know, the solidarity and the fight against apartheid, and after all, he's from MPLA, an organization with very close affinity to the African National Congress of South Africa. But also, these are very significant economies within the SADC region. It's a very oil-rich country. They're trying to diversify their economy, you know, using tourism, using many other aspects of their economy. And with South Africa, there's quite a lot to learn. So South Africa as well is keen to contribute enormously. For example, when you talk about Lobito Corridor, we saw for US President Joe Biden in Angola, that was a major talking issue around issues around the minerals really just moving out via Lobito Port. but also a very important one in terms of the Eastern DRC, South Africa and Angola, very critical players when it comes to the conflicts in the eastern parts of Congo.
And then let's wrap off with Zambia. Some interesting developments there. The former president, Edgar Lungu, cannot stand as a presidential candidate. The courts have ruled. Just talk to us about that.
A very unprecedented judgment by Zambian Constitutional Court, where they've said now former President Lungu cannot really just run for the presidential office, especially because he has made intention to run against President Khayelihle Khumalo. So the court said, look, you go back to 2014 when you took over from former President Michael Sata, as much as it was not a full term, but the court said, look, from our side, we do consider that you've ran 2 terms, so you've been barred from running for a 3rd term. But also, we do understand that Mr. Lungu, they are reading the documents. Obviously, they are very concerned about these particular developments.
All right, Khayelihle, thank you very much for that update. That's SABC reporter Khayelihle Khumalo speaking to us there.